In this video, we're going to talk about the map, filter, and reduce functions that are built into a TypeScript library. So what do these functions do? Let's go by them one by one. So the map function takes in some kind of array of values and then returns an array with each of those values mapped to a different value. So usually it's taking in one type and returns a different type. For instance, if we are trying to map strings into integers, you can take in an array of 5, 6, 7 in those string quotes, and it will return 5, 6, and 7 as integers. So that's a map function. What does a filter function do? Well, say you have an array of names and you want to filter it so that you only return names starting with K. Because as a mother who just had a child, you want to name her something that starts with a K specifically. So you could filter it and ask for the first letter of all those strings and only return those strings in that array that started with a K. So that's a filter. You're filtering for specific values. And then you have a reduce function, which takes in an array of values and reduces it all to one singular output. For instance, say you take in an array of numbers, you could have a reduce function that kind of acts like a sum function and returns the sum of all of the numbers in that array. So those are our three built-in libraries: map, reduce, and filter. And so we're going to use it today to talk about how we're going to decide to register for classes coming up at the end of this November. So to start off, we went ahead and made a database of courses. You can see the code here. Basically, what it is we just made some department names: comp, English, American Studies, art history, and then we came up with some random number values for course numbers, like 400, 300, 255, etc. And we just did a double for loop. So we said for the length of the departments, go inside, and for the length of the course numbers, we want you to make a class. We made this class object that has that department name and that course number. So in the end, we have department length times department array length times course number array length number of classes. So that's just a little walkthrough of the database that we built. Now let's get on to using map, filter, and reduce functions to decide what classes to enroll in.
Alright, so for the first step in course enrollment, say I want to just see all the courses I have available to me. That should be pretty easy, right? We can use our print function to print arrays like we've done so far. So let's just say print courses and see what happens. And if we just say print courses and run that, we see this weird object cluster over here on the web page. That's not what we expected. So what's going on? Well, a course to TypeScript is a class. We've made this class that's called course that has a department and a number in it. And TypeScript doesn't know how to print classes by default. It knows how to put strings or numbers, but classes are too complicated, so it just prints out object. So we want to take our array of courses and get an array of strings that we want to print. So that sounds like a great use for the map function. So let's first make our function to translate a course into a string. So we'll name that course to string. We'll say function course to string, and it takes in a course, one parameter that's of type course, and it returns a string. So we're transforming our course into a string. And inside our function body, we'll return the course's department plus a space plus the course's number. Awesome. So now we've got a function that will take a course object and give us a string to describe it. So now we can use TypeScript's built-in map function to map or do something to every element in an array and give us a new array from courses to strings. So all we have to do to that, and we'll do this inside our print function call, so we'll say print, and we can say courses.map, and inside the parentheses of map, we'll pass in our function course to string. So run course to string on every course, and give us a new array with that, and then print that. And what do you know? Now we can see all the courses we have available to us. Awesome. Great, so this works beautifully. There's actually a shorthand way that we can do this. So this way is perfectly fine. We can define a transformer function that goes from one type to another type and then pass that function into a map. But we can actually use something called an anonymous function, which is a way of just writing a function and passing it in one time. It's like a one-off function that we only need to use this one place. So we don't need to define this whole function called course2string, because we don't need to use it but just this one time. So let's delete our course2string where we pass in course2string to the map function. And instead of that, we're going to put another set of parentheses. And that set of parentheses we're going to use to describe our anonymous function call. Inside those parentheses, just like we do with normal function declarations, we're going to put our parameters. So just like in our course2string function, we'll take in a course, so our one parameter will be a course. And outside the parentheses, we'll say that the function returns a string. And now there are no curly braces involved here. After the return type, we're going to put what's called a fat arrow. So the equals sign followed by the greater than sign. So it looks like an arrow. And that is kind of working like both our curly braces and our return statement here. So right now we're defining a function that takes in a course, returns a string, and the actual value that that thing returns is going to be whatever we put after that fat arrow. And what do we want to return? We want to return the course dot department plus a space plus course dot number. So we've defined an entire function right inside this function call. So we've said take courses and map on all of those courses this function that we're defining that takes in a course, returns a string, and here's what it actually does. And if we print that, we should get the same exact result that we did before. So when you're writing code, you can kind of pick whichever method you like best. If it feels better to you to define a function, give it a name, and then pass in that function to map, great. If you like writing it in line, if that's more concise for you, great. One thing to mention, we can only do kind of simple things here with this fat arrow syntax. So if we wanted to do something crazy, multiple line things, we would have to give it a name and then pass in the function name. But if it's something simple, like just returning a string or returning the sum of two numbers or something, we can use this shorthand syntax. Alright, so the next step in my course enrollment is I want to take an advanced class. So in order to complete my major, I need to take another class that's higher than 400. So I need to filter all of our courses down to just the courses that have numbers higher than 400. So just like before we made our course2string function, in order to filter it by whether the course has a number greater than 400, let's make a function to tell us whether a course has a number greater than 400. So we'll call that isAdvanced. We'll say function isAdvanced, and this function takes in a course and returns a boolean. Yes, it is true, it is advanced, or false, it is not an advanced course. And inside the function body, we'll just return whether the course's number is greater than 400. Cool, so now we've got this function ready that'll tell us whether our courses are advanced or not, and we can filter our courses now. So underneath that we can say print courses.filter, and we can pass in isAdvanced to that filter function. So we're telling TypeScript, filter these courses based on this function that either returns true or false. And for all of the courses that it returns true on, that we want to end up in our filtered array. So if we just try and print that, again we get this weird object thing on the right, because all we've done is filter the course objects, and we're still trying to print just course objects. So after our filter call, we can say .map, so filter the array, and then take that filtered array of courses and map it with course2string again. So we can pass in our course2string function. So we're saying filter all the courses based on whether they're advanced, and then map them all to strings. And if we print that out, we get strings describing all the courses with numbers greater than 400. Alright, and just like before, we can use our fat arrow syntax to shorthand this filter. So instead of passing in isAdvanced to our filter function, we can put another set of parentheses, and inside that parentheses go the type of parameters that we want. So we are going to take in a course, one parameter that's of type course, and this function returns a boolean, because this is like a check function, whether it should be included in the filtered array or whether it shouldn't, true or false. And then we put our equal sign greater than, our fat arrow, and we just want to say course.number is greater than 400. So remember, whatever goes after the fat arrow is what will be returned. So this is like saying return whether the course's number is greater than 400. And if we save that and run it, it should do the exact same thing. Alright, so lastly, I like to define the difficulty of my semester based on the power score of it, which is just the sum of all of our course's numbers. So say I'm taking Comp 400 and Comp 401, my power score would be 801. We just sum all of the numbers. So, we're going to use our reduce function to do that, which takes in an array and reduces it down to a single value. So we want to take an array of courses and reduce it down to numbers. But if you might have caught, we're taking an array of courses and reducing it down to a number. Those are different types. So we're actually going to take an array of courses and map it onto an array of just the numbers, and then reduce that array down to our power score. Alright, so the first step in doing this is to define a course to number function. If we want to map all the courses to just an array of the numbers, we need a function that takes a course and gives us the number. So we'll say function course to number takes one parameter that's of type course and returns a number, and all we want to do in the function is just return the course's number. Cool. So now we can use that function and pass it into the map built-in function in TypeScript. So we can say print courses.map and pass in our course to number function. So we're taking all the courses in our catalog and getting all the numbers from them and printing out that array. And if we save that and run it, we should see an array of all of the numbers of all the courses that we can take. Cool. So now we want to take this array of numbers and reduce it down to the sum. And this is a really common pattern, chaining these filter map reduce function calls. So we take an array and map it, and then we want to take that array and reduce it. And you can chain these functions in different ways to manipulate data really easily. Alright, so just like map and filter, reduce also takes in as an argument a function, a reducer function that tells reduce how you want to reduce whatever array. That function takes in two parameters. One we're going to call memo, which stands for memory, and one is just the element that we're on in the array. So you can think of it as a reducer goes along the array that you're wanting to reduce and carries with it its memory. So memory typically starts with the first element in the array. So we pick up the first element in the array and say, okay, this is our memory. We go to the second element in the array and then do something and add that to our memory. And then go to the second one and then do something and change our memory. Go to the next one, do something and change our memory. So here, all we want to do is sum all of the numbers, right? So our reducer function is going to be called sum. And the memory is going to keep the going sum, and on each time it gets to a new element, it's going to add that element to the sum. So let's make this sum function. We'll say function sum takes in two parameters. One is called memo for memory, and that's going to be a number, it's the going sum as we reduce it. And one we're just going to call in, that's a number, and that's the each number that gets passed into the function. You can think of it that way. And we're going to return a number, because this reducer function represents one step in reducing it. So this reducer function takes in some memory passed in from previous reducing, or maybe it's the first one and it gets the first element in the array, takes the whatever element on the array we're in, does some logic to change the memory, and returns that memory, and we can keep on reducing afterwards. So we're going to return a number. Inside the function body, we're going to return our memory plus the number that we're on, because we're just summing. So we want to take whatever going sum we have add on the current number, return that sum, and keep going. Cool, so now we have this sum reducer function. And we can pass that in to TypeScript's reduce function. So we can say, after our map call, so we take courses and map them to numbers, we can say dot reduce and pass in our sum function. So map all the courses to their numbers and then reduce them to their sum. And if we print that out, we should get our course bulletin's power score, the sum of all of the numbers in the courses. Cool, so one last time, let's shorten this a little bit with our shorthand fat arrow syntax. So instead of passing in sum, we can put an extra set of parentheses, and inside those parentheses go the parameters of our anonymous function. So this parameter is memo, that's a number, another number that we're going to call in, and then it returns a number as well. So same declaration as our sum reducer function that we described above, and then we'll put our fat arrow and just say memo plus the number. And if we save that and run it, the same exact thing should happen. Alright, so now we see that the sum of all of the numbers of all of the courses is 38,412. Cool, so we hope this video helps you understand these fundamental parts of functional programming. These functions, map, filter, and reduce, are really, really useful for easily manipulating data. You might say, but we could just write for loops to do all of this, and you totally could. And if you want to write for loops to do things, you're welcome to do that. But if you learn how to use these map, filter, and reduce functions, they really make life a lot easier. Instead of doing this for loop and having eyes and things, it's a lot easier to just say courses.filter is advanced. And that's a lot easier to read than crazy loops. So, good, yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's so.
See you in the next video.